be here and to get to speak to you all night, kind of going along with this series, Conversations, that I think you started last week. Grant Antonio said this, but my name is Joel. I want to introduce you to my family real quick. Here's my wife, Jennifer. We've been married for 21 years. We've got a couple of daughters. Ellie, my 14-year-old, who's a freshman in high school right now, and who's an avid K-State fan. And so, 4 years, this is where she wants to be. Now, my youngest daughter, Alexa, my 12-year-old, I hate to admit it, guys, but she's a KU fan. All right, so we got some work to do, you know, with her, and that's my family. And I want to introduce you. They're actually here in the back of the room. But I'm excited to talk on this theme of conversations. But before we get into that and look at a specific conversation in the Bible, I want to go back to that question that you all were just discussing. Greatest rescues. And I'm just kind of curious, what were some of the greatest rescues that came to your mind? And so just shout a few of them out. You know, when you think of a great rescue sometime in history, what comes to mind?
Bill Snyder.
Bill Snyder, okay. Rescue K-State football. What else? Hacksaw Ridge. What would you think? Saving Private Ryan. A lot of great rescues come out of World War II. Maybe one more?
Rescue Hero Action Figures.
Rescue. What was that?
Rescue Hero Action Figures.
Rescue Hero Action Figures. I have no idea what that is, but I bet it's impressive, right? Amazing rescue story. Well, hey, let me share with y'all a few that come to my mind. Okay, I don't know if we can kind of compete on that level, but here's a few that come to my mind. Apollo 13. Okay, a lot of these have been made into movies, so you may not know the story, but you may have seen the movie. But this was a space launch going to the moon, right? And when they were there were some complications with the part of the shuttle that was going to return. And they actually could not get it to work. And so they actually had to take the lunar mobile, what was just intended to take 2 people for 2 days and land on the moon. They had to find a way to get that part, okay, of this Apollo 13 shuttle to get them to return to Earth. And so it was an amazing story. They didn't think it could happen, but yet it happened. In addition to that, 1987, baby Jessica. Okay, again, a story you may not be familiar with, but the entire world paused for this moment. This was in Texas, and there was an 18-month-old little girl, and she actually fell into a well. Okay, this had a hole of about 8 inches in its diameter. It was 22 feet deep, and this little 18-month-old girl fell into it, fell all the way to the bottom. And it took these different oil companies digging these oil, like drilling around it, and it took 56 hours. But after 56 hours of just the world waiting and just hundreds and hundreds of people coming around, they were able to rescue this little girl. And she was completely safe and is doing great to this day. One of the greatest rescues of all time. Another example of some from World War II. I mentioned Saving Private Ryan. Dunkirk was just an amazing rescue. 338,000 soldiers that were basically trapped in Dunkirk, France, and were cornered. And they had no way to escape, except for the fact that all these parents that lived over in England, they kind of rallied together 800 different boats, fishing boats, yachts, anything that could float, and they took it across the English Channel. And over a period of a few days, before the German army could kind of conquer them, they rescued 338,000 of them, brought them back to England, and they were able to kind of regroup. And the rest of the war really pivoted upon this moment. Here's another example from World War II. This was what was called the Great Raid of Cabanatuan. Okay, this was on the Pacific Front. The Japanese had conquered the American and the Philippine forces in the Philippines, had taken 60,000 of them hostage. Okay? And over the years of the war, basically they had been tortured and they had been killed to the point that there was only 500 of them left. And they were being kept at a prisoner of war camp in a city called Cabanatuan. Okay, when America began to kind of see the tide shift, the Allied forces, General MacArthur made a statement. He made a promise to the soldiers who were in the Philippines and who were in this prisoner of war camp. He said, "We will come back for you." And when the war was basically winding down, they made true on that promise. And they feared, hey, if we don't get in there and rescue these 500 prisoners of war that had been in a terrible condition, right, for a matter of years, they knew that they were going to be killed. And so they gathered 100 Army Rangers. They went in. It was this amazingly collaborated effort, and they rescued, without a single one dying, all 500 of these prisoners of war. It's what's been called the greatest rescue of all time. Another one you may be more familiar with, 13 Lives. How many of y'all seen this movie recently? Okay, it kind of recorded the history of these 12 young men who were part of a soccer team in Thailand, and their coach went into a cave. The cave flooded, okay, and it was a matter of how are they going to get out? There was a limited amount of time, a limited amount of oxygen. And these divers, these professional scuba divers, came in from England over to Thailand and coordinated this amazing effort to rescue all 13 of them. If you haven't seen the movie, it's definitely worth checking out. These are amazing rescues, right? And there's so many others that you all probably thought about the history. But there's one more that to me, it's not near on the scale of these as far as its significance, but it kind of hits closer to home. And this is what I'm going to call 9 Lives, right? And this was at a place called Devil's Den in 2008. Now the reason this was significant for me is because I was a part of it. Okay, now every rescue has a hero. Let me say this out of the gate. I was not the hero. Okay, I was the one being rescued from this moment. But there was a group of us, there was more than 9 of us, but I'll connect the dots later. We were making a spring break trip. Okay, if you notice, there's a few familiar faces here. You see Cody Cooper there in the back row. You see Heath Alexander with long hair, you know, there in front of me, and then there I am in the back row as well. You got my wife who is, at this point, 5 months pregnant with my oldest daughter. And a group of guys and girls from K-State had gone down to Arkansas for spring break. And we were going to spend a few days down there hanging out with some friends down there. And one morning that we were there, we met some friends of ours from Arkansas at this state park called Devil's Den. And it was a great time. The ladies were doing something, us guys went over to this waterfall and just were kind of hanging out and horsing around, having a good time. So here was the 7 of us from K-State, and you'll notice that there was 8 guys from Arkansas. And so we spent some time together, and the ladies were doing their thing. And after this, some of the guys said to us, they kind of got this whole group together, there's a little over 20 of us. They said, hey, over here there's a cave. We ought to go check this thing out. Sounds like a great idea, right? And so we decided, well, let's go check out this cave. And so all 20, 22, something like that of us, we went into this cave. And for about 500 feet, you had to kind of get in through the opening, and it was a big cave. Right? A few people had some little headlamps and others had flashlights. So we kind of went in and explored kind of the baseline level of the cave. And at this point, we're about to leave the cave. And one of the guys from Arkansas says, hey, I think there's another little corridor we should go check out. And all of us from Kansas are like, hey, that sounds like a good idea. You know, for the most part. Now, 7 of the 8 guys from Arkansas that were part of that crew said, no, we're out. You know, we're not checking out that corridor. So, and we should have noted at that moment, we should have kind of realized, hey, something's a little fishy, you know, about this. So 7 of the 8 guys left. One guy stays there with us, and he convinces us all to go check this out. One of the guys that was with us, he pieced out. A few of the ladies pieced out. But there was a group of us, 9, who said, yeah, we'll go with you. And we'll see what this other kind of corridor of the cave has to offer. But right out of the gate, we had to climb through this little tight hole. We had to climb up this area of the cave, climb into this hole that was barely big enough for us to get through. Okay, matter of fact, all of us guys got our rear stuck in it. We actually had to be kind of pulled from the other side to get through. And we realized something as we made it through kind of that opening at this second part of the cave. We realized, hey, whatever this cave or whatever this kind of route has in store for us, there's no going back. Okay, it was too tight, it was too awkward to kind of make its way through, and so we were just hoping that maybe this had an exit. Okay, so all 9 of us make our way through, and it just gets more intense and more crazy. People start hyperventilating, right? If you've ever been claustrophobic or something like that, people are having panic attacks, and it's getting really intense. We're at this one point where these rock cliffs are kind of at this angle, and there's no floor. Okay, it's just kind of this crevasse that just keeps going down. You know, those scenes like in movies where you drop the rock and you're trying to listen to see how long is it going to take, you know, for it to finally hit something. That was kind of the scene, and we're going through this, and you can't stand on anything, so you're kind of wedging yourself between this kind of cliff face and this one, trying not to slip in, you know, to this gap. It just seems like it goes forever and ever and ever in a narrowing pattern. And so we're doing this single file, trying to make it across basically this gap. This is no exaggeration. And all of a sudden, the people in the front of the line, they get stuck. And one of the girls, who I think is second in line, because we were kind of all staggered, she begins to slip down into the crack. And she can't get out. And you can imagine there's a lot of tears here, there's a lot of panic, you know. Oh, I forgot to add this, there's bats everywhere around us, okay? Most of them were asleep, because this was in March, they were still hibernating, but everywhere along these cliff walls, there's bats. looking at you, and you're trying not to put your hand on them as you're kind of scaling through the wall. Now at this point, we realize, hey, everyone's panicking, people are thinking they're going to die, there's a lot of tears, but we're like, we got to do something about this. But all of us were stuck. We couldn't move, we couldn't get out, we could maybe shift a little bit, but no one could get over here to help this girl that was beginning to slide down this crack. And at this point, this is where the hero emerged, a guy named Caleb. And I'll show you his picture later. He was at a place where he had a little bit of grit. Maybe he was just tougher and stronger than the rest of us. But Caleb began to climb up the cliff face, again, kind of pushing his way against both sides. He climbed over all of us that were just sitting there, kind of helpless and hopeless. And he climbed all the way to the front of the line and was actually able to help this girl get out of kind of this crack that she had slid into. And then he kind of led us onward from that point on. It finally got to the point, and I'm giving you the real short version here, it got to the point where there was this little corridor, okay, that was about 2.5 feet wide and about 18 inches or so tall. And we were like, we have no idea where this goes, but we know we can't go back, and we don't know where else to go. And so we're all doing basically like a marine crawl, single file line. And we realize as we get in this corridor, again, pitch dark, and only a few of us have little lights, so we're kind of sharing what little light that we have. We're realizing as we're in this corridor, you can't turn around. I mean, it's barely bigger than all of us as we're marine crawling kind of through this. And again, the panic, and you're trying to maintain your composure, trying to stay calm, and just yard after yard after yard. 20 yards, 30 yards, 50 yards. We're just crawling through this tunnel, hoping that there's an exit somewhere. And fortunately for us, there was. Right? And all the panic, all the fear, all the craziness, there was some relief there. And we got out, we made it out alive, just a little bit dirty. Here's a picture of us afterwards. And there's Caleb there in the middle. Caleb was the hero. It wasn't me, it wasn't he, it wasn't Cody. It was Caleb, was our hero. Right? And in a lot of ways, he rescued us. Not just the girl that was trapped, but all the rest of us who were kind of in the middle of this panic. Right? So this was a moment of significant rescue for us. And every good rescue story has a hero. Okay, if you go back to each of those, Apollo 13, maybe Jessica Dunkirk, Comanche 1, 13 Lights, there's always heroes associated with these rescues. And there was for us in that cave about 12 years ago, 14 years ago. But the story, and the reason I set the stage for this, is that the story we're looking at tonight from the Bible really is a story. It's a conversation that leads to a rescue. And just like these rescue stories, there's a hero. Okay? And so I want us to listen to this conversation. It's only 10 verses long. It's about a guy named Zacchaeus in the Bible. And this is a story of rescue. And it's a conversation that leads to rescue. And this place in the book of Luke, which is one of the biographies of Jesus, this is the only place that we see this story in the entire Bible. But it's a significant one. Okay? And this story is going to teach us something about God, and it's going to teach us something about our lives as well. So I'm going to walk through it, and we'll try to understand the story. Then after that, I want to just highlight a couple of things that this will teach us about God, and a couple of lessons that we can learn from this conversation. So read along with me. Starts out saying this: Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus, and he was a chief tax collector, and he was wealthy. Now, let me pause here. Jericho is a city. It's a little bit northeast of Jerusalem. And as far as we know, according to the Bible, this is the only time that Jesus ever went to the city. So this is the one time he was passing through. And it says as he went through, there was a guy there named Zacchaeus. Now, we don't know a lot about Zacchaeus, but really out of the gate, we know a couple of things. That he was a tax collector and he was wealthy. Now, what that means is this. The fact that Zacchaeus, who was a Jewish man, was a tax collector, basically meant he was a traitor to his people. Okay, if you were a tax collector at that time, it meant you were a Jewish person, but you had kind of turned your back on God, and you had turned your back on your people. And you had decided, hey, I'm going to be loyal to the Roman Empire, and I'm going to be loyal to Caesar. And I'm going to kind of be Caesar's kind of agent to come and collect money from all of my Jewish people in the city. Okay? And so he was an extortionist. Okay? He was constantly not just taking money from them, but he was also stealing from them, because that's how tax collectors made their money. So if it was their job to collect, say, for example, $100 from every family, they would not only take that $100 to pass on to Rome and to Caesar, but they could take another $100 or $200 or $300 from every family. And because the government was so oppressive at that time, the Roman Empire was so oppressive, the people had really no choice. Whatever he wanted to take from them, they were required to give him. And so you can see why the people didn't like tax collectors. Because he was constantly, it was a job that was filled with injustice, right? And extortion and robbing the people time and time again. So that's what we know about Zacchaeus. That's the kind of guy he is. He's turned his back on God, he's turned his back on his people, and we also know that he's really good at his job. Okay, we know that because he wasn't just a tax collector, but he was the chief tax collector, right? He had climbed the ranks because he was so good at what he did. And then lastly, the Bible tells us not only was he the chief tax collector, but he was wealthy. Okay, so he'd been doing this for a long time, and he had stolen a lot of money from a lot of people, and as a result, he had a lot of cash. Okay, that's the guy that we're talking about. That's the guy that's going to have this conversation with Jesus tonight. We go on. It says that when Jesus came into town, he, referring to Zacchaeus, he wanted to see who Jesus was. But because he was short, he couldn't see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. So as Jesus comes into town, you can imagine there's a lot of commotion. There's a lot of excitement. Like, who is this guy? They've heard a little bit about him. You know, he's supposedly something special. He kind of works miracles. He has some interesting teaching. He claims to be God. What is the big deal about this guy? And so a massive crowd begins to form. And Zacchaeus is like, well, man, I want to see this guy. I want to learn about him. I want to know what he's about. And the Bible tells us that Zacchaeus, I don't know how short he was, but it just takes note of the fact that he's a short guy. And so in the midst of this crowd, he can't see. But you can see that he's innovative here. You know, short guy, I can't see this Jesus in the midst of the crowd as he's coming into town. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run ahead of the path that he's making his way through the town. There's this big tree that happens to be there. I'm going to climb the tree just so I can get a look at this guy. Okay, so can you picture that? Here's this random dude kind of making a fool of himself, climbing a tree. And he's the guy that everyone in town doesn't really like. But he's climbing this tree as kind of this parade is coming through town as Jesus is entering town. Okay? The story goes on. Verse 5. Now when Jesus reached the spot, he looked at him and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay in your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. So as Jesus is making his way through, he notices, hey, there's this little dude up in a tree. Right? Looking down. Now Jesus, obviously again, being God, this is the first time he's ever been in this town, the only time he's ever been in this town, but he knows this guy's name. And so he sees Zacchaeus up in this tree, and he says to him, hey Zacchaeus, hey, I want you to come down, because I'm going to come to your house today. And you notice how Zacchaeus responds. He says, man, sure. He comes down at once, and he welcomes him gladly. There's an excitement that Zacchaeus has towards getting to spend time with Jesus here. Now, you can imagine how all the people responded. Right? Jesus says to Zacchaeus, I want to hang out with you. Zacchaeus says, sure, let's roll, you know. But all the people around, they say this. They see this happening. They begin to mutter, he's going to be the guest of a sinner. Like in the whole community, there's probably a few thousand people that live there thinking, why is Jesus, this religious guy, hanging out with him? Of all the people that he could spend the rest of today with, why is he going to that guy's house? You know, that's the last person that he should be hanging out with. Does he know who he is? Does he know what he's done? Right? Does he know his track record, if you will? That's what the people are muttering as they kind of see this scene. So Jesus makes this invitation. We see Zacchaeus come down, and some people respond. But now, look at how Zacchaeus responds. It says Zacchaeus, and some time has elapsed here. We don't know how long. Maybe it's a couple hours, maybe it's half a day, maybe it's the entire day. But where the scene picks back up, we have Zacchaeus responding to the situation. It says that he stood up and he said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now I give half my possessions to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay it back 4 times the amount. So notice this response. Notice the things that he says, right? Jesus wants to spend time with him. We don't know what all happened in the conversation. The people are muttering, but this is how Zacchaeus responds. And after he responds this way, we come to basically the end of the conversation. And here we see Jesus responding. And here's what Jesus says. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Okay? This is Jesus' response to everything that's gone on as a result of this conversation that he has with this guy. Now, what I want us to highlight, kind of briefly tonight, is two things that this conversation teaches us about Christ. And the two lessons that we can learn from Zacchaeus. And to do that, I want to start at the end of the conversation, and then we'll kind of work our way back, okay? Because the end of the conversation, this last statement, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save what's lost, this is Jesus summarizing all that took place in this conversation. He's describing for us what's going on in this story, and what's happening with him, and what's happening with this guy named Zacchaeus, and ultimately what God wants to happen with all of us. Okay, so let's consider this last statement coming out of Jesus' mouth. The Son of Man, that's Jesus referring to himself. Okay, that's kind of a title that was given to the Messiah, to the Savior, if you will, that was to come in the Old Testament of the Bible. So Jesus is referring to himself here, and he says, listen, I came to seek and to save what's lost. Everything that you've just seen, as he's talking to Zacchaeus and Zacchaeus' friends and all the people in Jericho, he says, this is what's happening here. You need to understand what I'm doing and what's going on. And he summarizes it in this phrase. Now let's think about the last word, the lost. The Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. When you hear the word lost, I don't know what necessarily comes to your mind. But when I think about something being lost, I think of something having like its location being misplaced, right? Like how many of you all, for example, have at some point this semester lost your keys? Maybe you didn't lose them permanently, but you just lost them. Becca, you look, does it happen kind of often? The laughter there is implying this is a common occurrence for you. Okay, sorry, too embarrassing. Did you find them at least? Okay, you found them. Okay, there's some debate here. Who else lost their keys? Even for like a day or an hour, something like that? Can you resonate? Okay? How about this? How many of y'all lost your phone at some point this semester or recently, or maybe permanently? Right? When you think about something being lost, you think, I've misplaced it. I don't know where it's located, right? When I think of this, I think of the TV series Lost, one of the greatest TV series of all time, right? I don't know how many seasons this had, like 9 or something. They never knew where they were. Right? When we think of something being lost, we think of it having a misplaced location. But when Jesus uses this word, when he says, hey, I came to seek and to save the lost, he's not talking about something with a misplaced location. Okay? One, he's talking about people. Specifically, he's talking about Zacchaeus as a prototype for all of us. But it's not that Zacchaeus doesn't know where he's located. The word that Jesus uses here to describe lost is this word in Greek. It doesn't mean to be misplaced in its location, but this word lost means that something is destroyed. Something has been rendered useless. Something is in a ruined condition. It's not what it was meant to be. Right? Something has experienced, or is going to experience, eternal misery. And so when Jesus says, I came to seek and to save the lost, he doesn't mean I came to find people that are in a misplaced location. But he's saying, hey, I'm coming to find people whose condition has been ruined. Right? Who are not what they were meant to be. And it's easy for us to look at a guy like Zacchaeus and be like, okay, yeah, I can see that. He's kind of in a ruined condition, right? I mean, he's an extortionist. He's greedy. He's selfish. He's made his entire livelihood off of stealing, from other people. He's turned his back on his people, and he's turned his back on God. And we say, man, that's a guy in a ruined condition. He had no friends. He had a horrible reputation, right? Even the only people that hung around him, they were just hanging around him because they were kind of mooching off of him, right? Because he had money, so but they didn't really care about him. Right? And so when we see Zacchaeus, he's lost, not that we don't know where he's at, but that the condition, his person, he's lost in his greed. He's lost in his selfishness. And it's alienating him, not only from God, but it's alienating him from everyone else. And so it's easy for us to look at a guy like him and be like, yeah, man, he's lost. But yet the reality is the Bible says that not just a guy like Zacchaeus, who's characterized by greed and extortion and selfishness and injustice, that's not just what it means to be in a ruined condition, but the Bible says, that's actually a picture of all of us. We're all lost in the sense that none of us are what we were intended to be. God created all of us in his image, the Bible teaches us, which means we were intended to reflect the character and the characteristics in the heart of God. And the reality is none of us do that. None of us are the condition that God intended for us to be in. None of us live the life that God intended for us to live. So it's not just guys like Zacchaeus that are lost, but this is a description of all of us. And Jesus says, I came to seek and to save the lost. But Zacchaeus here is kind of lifted up as example A for us. Okay? So lost doesn't mean misplaced in its location, but ruined in its condition. And with that backdrop, here's two things we need to learn about Christ. Two things that he's going to teach us about himself in this statement, right? That's at the end of this conversation that they have. The first is that Jesus says, hey, I came to seek the lost. I came to seek the lost. Now this word seek here means to strive after, to crave, to pursue, or to search for with diligence. And this is Jesus saying, hey, this is how I view people in a ruined condition. Okay? People who aren't what they were meant to be, which again is all of us in this room. You see, sometimes we would think, well, if Jesus walked in and sees this guy that's a thief, that's turned his back on God, turned his back on his people, that Jesus would be real kind of condemning of him. But isn't it interesting that we see the opposite? When Jesus sees this guy named Zacchaeus, instead of condemning him, instead of looking down on him, instead of being judgmental towards him, what does he do? He strives after him. He looks at him in the tree and he says, hey, Zacchaeus, I want you to come down. I'm going to hang out with you today. Right? We see him pursuing him. We see him searching for him. Right? And that's a picture of how God operates. God is one who seeks those who are lost, those who have a ruined condition, those of us who are broken, who aren't what we were intended to be. And this is why all the people around, they couldn't believe it. They're like, Jesus, that's the last guy you should be hanging out with. Right? He's cruel. He's a thief. He's selfish. Right? Why would you hang out with him? You should be judgmental towards him, because that's the way they all were towards him. And yet we see Jesus doing the exact opposite. Even in that guy's ruined condition, we see Jesus responding with compassion and with pursuit and diligently searching for him. Okay? That's the way God is. Not just in this conversation, but that's the way God is for all of us. Right? No matter who you are, no matter what you've done, no matter where you've been, this is the heart of God for us. The Bible teaches us that God is one who seeks, who craves to chase after those who have turned their back on him, who diligently searches for us, even when we run from God, right? Who's pursuing us and striving after us because he loves us and because he cares for us. So the first thing we see about Christ here is he's not just indifferent towards the lost. He's not judgmental towards us in our ruined condition, but he's seeking after us. Second thing, though, we can learn here about Christ is not only is he seeking after the lost, but notice the next thing. He says the Son of Man came not just to seek the lost, but to save the lost. And this is where the story at the beginning kind of comes into picture, because this word save, it literally means to rescue. When Jesus says here, I came to seek and to save the lost, he says, hey, I'm diligently searching for people in a ruined condition, but I'm coming to rescue people from that condition. This word sozo in Greek here means to rescue from danger, destruction, and to heal and to renew someone that's suffering. And Jesus says, hey, this is why I came. Not just to diligently seek after or strive after people in a ruined condition, but I'm here to rescue. You see, every one of those stories we talked about earlier, it had a hero. Okay? All those people were in some predicament that they couldn't get themselves out of. And someone had to step up. There had to be some hero to rescue them from the helpless and hopeless situation. And the Bible says that all of us are in that same situation. And yet Jesus says, hey, I'm here as the hero. Right? That Jesus' entire life, Jesus' death, Jesus' resurrection was all about our rescue. One way you could view this story of the entire Bible is it's a picture of God on a rescue mission. And Jesus is summarizing that at the end of this conversation. He wants Zacchaeus to know, I'm here to rescue you. He wants all of Zacchaeus' friends to know, I'm here on a rescue mission. And it's for all of you all as well. He wants even all the people that are frustrated with him in that moment to know, listen, this is what I'm about. In order that I can heal and renew people and restore them back to what God intended for our hearts and for our lives and for the direction and the trajectory of our lives to be about. Christ is saying here, I'm on a rescue mission. I came to seek and to save. And that's what he's doing. Right? That's what he's doing in our world today, just like he did in this guy's life, 2,000 years ago. And so 2 things we learn about Christ. He came to seek the lost, and he came to save, or to rescue the lost. Now let's look at the other side of the coin. Let's look at Zacchaeus. Okay, because there's something we can learn about Christ, there's something we can learn from this guy. And something that I think we can say, hey, there's some admirable qualities in Zacchaeus that I think we can benefit from seeing. And here's the first thing. Zacchaeus was hungry to learn and to grow. He was hungry to learn and to grow. Now this guy was far from God. Remember, he turned his back on God, turned his back on his people. But yet when Jesus came to town, he was curious. And his curiosity actually led him to be proactive. Say, hey, I want to get to know more about him. I want to know what he's like. And if I have the opportunity to spend time with him, I'm going to jump at him. Right? He was hungry to learn and to grow. And let me give you some examples. There's at least 5 pieces of evidence of this in the story itself, in the conversation. When Jesus comes up to him and says, hey, come down, man, let's hang out. Notice what he says. It says, 1, he wanted to see Jesus. Right? That's why he climbed the tree. So he ran ahead, again, showing just a desire there. He climbed the tree in order to see. And then when Jesus said, hey, come down, it says that he came down at once. And lastly, it says that he welcomed him gladly. Right? Do you see here the hunger that Zacchaeus had? Now, when there's an opportunity to get to know God, when there's an opportunity to interact with Jesus, right, he jumped at it. It wasn't just like, well, if I had time. This was a priority for him. And I think this is a lesson that we could learn from him. Right? If we have an opportunity to get to know God, if we have an opportunity to grow in our faith, do we show the same kind of initiative, the same kind of hunger that we see in this guy? Right? Are we willing, if you will, figuratively, to climb some trees, right, in order to learn more about God? Again, Zacchaeus probably looked a little funny, right? A little strange. But you know what? He didn't care. He was doing what he could to be in a position to learn more about God. Right? And my question for us to consider tonight is, are we willing to do that? Right? You all have amazing opportunities, in a sense, to climb a tree. Amazing opportunities all around you to get to know God, to discover more about him, to discover his purpose, his plan for your life. And what I want to encourage you to think about is, man, am I taking advantage of that? You don't want to squander the opportunities that you have. Again, Zacchaeus, for all we know, according to the Bible, Jesus only went to this town one time. One time for a day or 2. And this is the conversation that happened. See, he knew this was a unique opportunity, and he didn't want to squander it. And so he jumped all over it. And you all have those opportunities around you every day, every week. I mean, you're here tonight. Tonight, you're climbing a tree. Just by being here, to want to take a look. Right? And to learn more about who God is. Right? You have a chance to go to church. There's good churches here in the community. That's a chance to climb a tree. Okay? You have chances to be a part of maybe some faith discussions here on campus. Right? With some of your friends. That's an opportunity to climb a tree. Right? To get to know more about God and what He's like. Right? You have the conference like SMC coming up over Christmas break. Once again, it's an opportunity to climb a tree. It's an opportunity to say, hey, I want to take a few days and I want to learn more about God. I want to come down and eagerly discover more of who He is and more of what He has for you. And I just want to encourage you, with any opportunity that you have to get a better understanding of God or to grow in your faith, not to squander it. Learn the lesson from Him and take advantage of those opportunities. Because I promise you, the day will come 25 years from now when you're my age and you'll realize you just don't have the opportunities later in life that you do right now. You have more opportunities to grow, to understand, to learn about God now than you ever will the rest of your life. You don't want to miss them. You don't want to squander them. Right? Every week I visit different college campuses right around the Midwest and around the country. You all have opportunities that so many other college men and women around this country do not have. Don't squander those opportunities. Climb those trees and take advantage of it. I've had opportunities to spend time around the world. I got to live in Asia for a significant period a few years ago. We don't realize the opportunities that we have, the trees that we can climb here, that the rest of the world doesn't have. You'll have opportunities every day, every week. Take advantage of it. Don't squander them, because you won't regret it. And the day will come when you won't have as many as you do now. Does that make sense? First lesson we can learn from Zacchaeus. He was hungry to learn and grow. Let's be that way, and let's take advantage of those opportunities as well. To flesh this out just a little bit, some of the trees that he's got to climb, Caden's going to come up, and he's going to show you a little bit about how he's grown his hunger in order to take advantage of opportunities to learn more about God and to follow him. So let's give it up for Caden.
Yeah, so in high school, I was an atheist. Many of you might not know that, but yeah, I really made it a point in my life to kind of just disprove the idea of a God and really just disprove the idea of Christianity as a whole. And as a result, I really just kind of hated the idea of a God. And so naturally, kind of came into college with the same mindset. I really wanted nothing to do with my faith. It was really never even something I considered pursuing, much less seeing myself here right now. But so I remember that all changed one day when I moved into Haymaker. Shout out my Hay7 boys right now. Last year. Yes, sir. But yeah, I remember moving in, and I remember just meeting these two guys that were just different from everybody else. I mean, they weren't doing the typical college guy thing. They were really living different, and it made a difference in my life, and I noticed that. And so these were just two guys that I wanted to get around. And I remember one night sitting in their room, 7:03, playing Call of Duty late at night. And man, my buddy Jordan, he's one of those guys that loves to scream at the TV when he plays video games. And man, it's fun to watch. And so this was quite the entertainment. And I just remember they were getting up and they were getting ready to leave, and they invited me to a late night. And this was like the 5th or 6th time at this point in the semester that they invited me. And I finally just gave in and said, okay, I got nothing better to do, I'll go. So I went, sat in these seats right here, and man, I kind of went in and left without really anything changing. But 2 weeks later, I went to another late night where they introduced the idea of SMC to me. And this was something that I had never heard of. I didn't grow up in the Christian world. I didn't know what a Christian conference would look like. And I still, in that moment, made the decision to sign up. I saw it, I was like, last year I was in Kansas City. I saw, it's a couple days downtown Kansas City with the boys. It'll be fun. I don't really know what we're going to do, but we'll make the most of it. So I just decided to sign up in the moment. And I didn't know what to expect, but one of the things I remember, first memories about SMC was just walking into this big Marriott hotel. It kind of looks similar to the room we're in right now, but just like 10 times the size. It was huge, it was beautiful, and I was just kind of overwhelmed. Not only by the setting, but like the 1,000 new faces I was seeing. There's people from all over. I have no idea what to expect. This is kind of crazy, but so I kind of just remember going through the motions at first. This is kind of overwhelming. It was a new experience for me, but I really, just kind of kept my head down like I did in Haymaker as well. So the next morning, wake up, buddies go to an encounter. It's titled "Swiping Right in Relationships." An encounter is kind of just like a breakout. It's early in the morning. It's optional. It's cool. You should go if you go to SMC. But anyway, it was this talk about putting Christ at the center of your relationship. And it was something to me where I was just like, I sat there just shocked and confused. One, why would you ever want to put Jesus at the center of a relationship, much less any decision you ever made? So I just remember sitting there shocked and confused. So this mindset kind of led into the next day. I went to a breakout, and it was titled Trust Issues. It was just talking about the validity of the Bible. And I was sitting there with my friends Jordan and Jacob in just this dingy basement room, and the speakers talking about the Bible. I don't have a Bible. I don't read a Bible. I'm still an atheist at this point, mind you. But I'm sitting there, and I'm hearing all these archaeological and historical facts about how the Bible is real, it is valid, it is genuine, it is true. And I kind of just realized in that moment, like, whoa, if this book is accurate, that means everything I'm being taught from it must also be accurate. So I kind of just carried that mindset throughout the rest of SMC. And the next day, went to a main session. It was late at night, and I was sitting there and listening to the speaker talk about what it would look like for me to give my life to God and His mission. And in that moment, I just realized not only did I need to, but I wanted to make the decision to give my life to Christ. And after making that decision, even though easily the best decision I ever made, it hasn't always been sunshine and rainbows. It hasn't always been easy. And it required me to climb some trees, kind of like Joe was talking about. I had to climb the tree of joining a Bible study, something I was scared to do. I didn't know what that looked like, but I did it. I joined a fresh group. We read through 1 Peter. I saw what it looked like to really understand and build a solid foundation in the Word. And this was something that was new to me, but I climbed that tree. Another tree that I climbed was just seeking out leadership, seeing people in my life that were seeking me out, wanted to spend intentional time with me. I realized I needed to take advantage of that. Another tree was, I'd already done it, but SMC, just realizing all these opportunities, like Joe was saying, that, there's so many opportunities that we have to grow in our faith. And I just realized, hey, these are things I need to do, these are trees I need to climb. And so, like I said, it hasn't always been easy, but one thing is that it's always worth it. So, appreciate letting you guys share, and welcome back up, Joel.
Appreciate that, Kate. And here's the reality. You never regret the trees that you climb. Right? But imagine if Zacchaeus hadn't climbed that tree. Imagine if he hadn't taken that initiative. The opportunity was there, but you got to make that choice, right? You got to climb those trees. But I promise you will regret the trees you don't climb. Right? You will, not just in the immediate sense, but in the long term. Again, I know so many people my age who look back and say, man, I wish I would have done some things different when I was in college. I wish I would have valued some things. I wish I would have prioritized my faith. And they're like, man, I wish I could go back. Right? And so my encouragement to you is you won't regret climbing those trees. Take advantage of them while you have them. Okay? Zacchaeus did that, and that's a lesson we can learn from him. It brings us to one last lesson. And Caden's story kind of segues into this as well. Because as Zacchaeus was hungry to learn, as he was very eager to discover, to get to know who Jesus was, and to discover more of God's heart, you realize it had an effect on him. Right? Caden said, hey, as I was learning more about God, it was making a difference in my life. It was changing things about who I was, my values, my heart, and all. And that's exactly what we see. That's the second lesson I want to see from Zacchaeus. Because not only was he hungry to learn and to grow, but his heart, his values, his life, and ultimately his eternity was changed. Right? Okay, this conversation. Last week, we were talking about another man who was rich, a guy who was moral. And you know what? He walked away unchanged. He saw the opportunity before him. And as those of y'all that were here last week, he just said, hey, I'm going to keep living my life the way that I want to live. But in Zacchaeus, we see something different happen. This conversation, this rescue mission that Jesus was on, resulted in changing his heart, his values, his life, and ultimately it changed his eternity. Let me remind you of the statement. Remember, this was his response. After him and Jesus had interacted for a good chunk of this day, this is how he responded. And then let me highlight 3 things that are in this response. He says this, look, Lord, here and now I give half my possessions to the poor. And if I cheat anybody out of anything, I'll pay it back 4 times these amount, or the amount. Now let me highlight 3 things that are captured in this statement. Again, we don't know everything that happened in the conversation, but from what we do know, there's at least 3 significant things that we can see in Zacchaeus. The first is this, is his allegiance changed. His allegiance changed. You see, as a tax collector, remember, he turned his back on God, turned his back on his people. Okay, he was an employee of the Roman government. Okay, and as an employee of the Roman government, this was his cry, this was his kind of mantra for life, if you will. He was required to make this statement, Kaiser Kyrios, which in Greek means Caesar is Lord. Okay, if you go back and look at your history of the Roman Empire, that was a common theme. It was on some of the coins, it was kind of the Pledge of Allegiance, if you will. If you were a Roman citizen at that point, you were saying, Caesar is Lord, which at that point meant God. And your rallying cry was Kaiser Kyrios. Caesar is Lord. Caesar is God. And that's what Zacchaeus, that would have been, as a tax collector, that would have been his allegiance, if you will. Caesar was his God. Caesar was his Lord. But did you notice in the conversation, the very first words out of Zacchaeus' mouth, after he and Jesus had spent this day together, The very first words out of his mouth were this: Kyrios. Here and now, here's what I'm going to do. You see, out of his mouth came the words, you, Jesus, are King. You are Lord. For the past 10, 20, 30 years, however long he'd been in this role, he'd been saying, Caesar, you are my God. Caesar, you are my Lord. But after this conversation, he says, no, Jesus, you're my Lord. You're my King. My allegiance has changed. I'm not ultimately loyal to Caesar now. I'm loyal to you. I'm following you from this point forward. See, Zacchaeus' allegiance has changed. But not only did his allegiance change, but his conscience changed. You see, before this, he was an extortionist. He had built his entire life off of injustice, off of stealing from people, right? And he was good at it. But did you notice how he also responded? He didn't just say, Jesus, you're now my king, but he was committed to righting all of his wrongs. Up until this point, he says, all that I've stolen, all that I've embezzled, all that I've extorted from people, he says, hey, here and now, anyone that I've wronged, I'm not just going to return it to you. I'm going to pay it back 4 times the amount of what I've stolen. You see how his conscience changed? Instead of delighting in injustice and embezzlement and extortion, now all of a sudden, he's committed not just to justice, but to going above and beyond. I'm going to make it right. Everything I've stolen, I'm going to pay back. And not just pay it back, I'm going to pay it back 4 times the amount that I stole. His allegiance changed, but his conscience changed. But then lastly, and I think what's powerful is we see that his value changed. You see, because at the root of all of this was the issue of greed and selfishness, right? The reason Caesar was his king and Caesar was his Lord is it was a way for him to live a selfish life. The reason why he was a tax collector, the reason why he was stealing so much from everyone else is because of his greed and his self-centeredness that had just captured his life. Again, he was lost in his greed and lost in his selfishness. But notice he didn't just say, Jesus, you're my new king. I'm going to right all my wrongs and pay back all that I've stolen. But with whatever's left, did you catch that statement? He said, hey, here and now, whatever I've got left when this is all said and done, half of it, I'm going to give to those who need it more than me. You just wonder, is there anything left? Right? And we don't know. We don't know the facts. We don't know the figures. But it does teach us something about his heart. Because you see, his allegiance changed. His conscience changed. But ultimately, his values and his heart changed. Because that's what this kind of rescue does. Right? Remember the rescue and the definition. Jesus says, hey, I came to save, to rescue what's lost. It meant not just to rescue from danger, but to heal and to renew. Right? The person or the object of that rescue. And that's exactly what we see in Zacchaeus' life. He wasn't just rescued from hell, from some eternal misery. He was rescued from the misery that he had created for his own life. And when his heart changed, it changed the way he viewed life, it changed the way he viewed people, it changed the way he viewed his selfishness and his greed. And he becomes the kind of man that God created him and intended for him to be. And that's what this rescue does. And that's what this conversation gives us a snapshot of. And this, in a similar way, is what God wants to do in our lives. The whole Bible can be described as a rescue mission for all of us. In the New Testament, Paul puts it this way. Right? He summarizes the whole story of the Bible, referring to God. He says that God has rescued us from the dominion of darkness. He's brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. And what I want us to realize tonight is this isn't just a story about Zacchaeus, although it is, but it's so much more. This is Christ telling us what he's in this world to do, what he's doing even now, what he wants to do on this campus, right? What he wants to do in each of our lives here. About Christ, we learn that he came to seek the lost, all of us. He's diligently striving, searching. He longs to have a relationship with us. But he also wants to not just seek, but to save. And we, like Zacchaeus, we can learn, hey, there's opportunities for us to discover. There's opportunities for us to come down and spend time eagerly with him, to get to know him. And as we do, we'll find that he changes our allegiance, he changes our conscience, he changes our values, and he makes us into the people that he's always intended for us to be. And that's the offer that's available. That's the rescue that's available. That's the conversation that God wants to have with each one of us as well. Make sense? Okay, well, let's do this. We're going to take the last couple of minutes here before Graham and Antonio come back up and close this out. I just want you to turn to 2 or 3 people around you. I just want you to think about these questions. Just take a few minutes and discuss what we can learn from this conversation. This conversation that led to Zacchaeus' rescue, and what's its relevance towards us, and the rescue that God wants to create in each of our lives as well. Take a few minutes to do this with the person or 2 beside you, and then we'll wrap it up.